Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Rambler Podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Smith, and I work in our advancement office here at Cathedral Prep as the Assistant Vice President of Development and Strategic Initiatives. I am also a proud member of the Prep Class of 2011. But today I am thrilled to introduce you to our guest, Dr. Chris Clark. If you don't know much about Dr. Clark, let me fill you in a little bit about his background. Dr. Clark was born and raised here in Erie, PA. He graduated from Cathedral Prep in 1987, and he was the class president his senior year. He then went on to Boston College, where he was a dual major studying pre-med and psychology. He graduated cum laude from Boston College in 1991, and after that pursued his graduate studies in gerontology at Gannon University. Dr. Clark completed his internship and residency in family medicine at Geisinger Medical Center in Danville, Pennsylvania. And it was at this time that Dr. Clark and his wife, Dr. Caitlin Clark, decided to return to Erie, where he began practicing as a physician at Primary Care Partners. And so after a couple years there, Dr. Clark decided to move on from daily practice of medicine and instead take a position as the internship program director at St. Vincent Health System. From there, he went on to serve in a number of leadership roles through his career, such as the Senior Vice President of Medical Affairs, Chief Quality Officer, Associate Chief Medical Officer, and Director of Continuation Medical Education. And then in 2017, Dr. Clark became the president of St. Vincent Hospital, where he oversees a staff of over 2,900 employees and 425 physicians. St. Vincent's commitment to superior patient care, quality, and service has earned the hospital national recognition. According to the Quantros Care Checks quality report, St. Vincent is ranked number 1 in Erie for medical excellence in overall hospital care, overall medical care, overall surgical care, cancer care, cardiac care, major cardiac surgery, heart attack and heart failure treatment, stroke, women's health, and gastrointestinal hemorrhage care. Dr. Clark has also been married to his wife, Dr. Caitlin Clark, for 24 years, and they have 3 children. Jacob, prep class of 2020, Sarah, prep class of 2023, and Adam, prep class of 2026. So we are very, very fortunate to have Dr. Clark sitting with us here today. As I went over, he's got a number of amazing accomplishments so far in his career and rise in the ranks here at St. Vincent. But thank you for joining us today, Dr. Clark, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. It's an honor to be asked to be a part of this new program, and I give you a lot of credit for putting something like this together to provide some great outreach to the prep community and others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. You know, the idea was to have people such as yourself with amazing accomplishments and leadership experience to get a chance to kind of share about your time at prep, how you kind of rose throughout your career and whatnot, and be able to impart some wisdom on people that can help them in their career as well. So thank you again.
Well, you're welcome. I hopefully can be impactful with regards to all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get started here, I guess. You know, one of the things I want to talk about was how did you end up choosing prep as the high school you wanted to go to, and, you know, however you want to kind of share that.
Yeah, well, first of all, just being a part of this program has allowed me to reflect back to my prep experience. So with regards to a question like that, thinking back, I was committed to prep from the earliest time in my memory. I was a product of the parochial Erie Catholic grade school system. The Sisters of St. Joseph have had a great influence on me. So specifically, I started grade school at St. George's,
okay,
and then actually moved to Our Lady's Christian, now known as St. Jude, of course, for the 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah.
So, but I clearly was committed as influenced by my parents to Catholic education, and so I didn't know of any other options, really. I mean, I certainly know there are good options out there, and at the time as well, but at the same time, I was completely committed to prep. And then, to be more specific from there, probably the best answer I can give you is that my two older brothers, are graduates of Cathedral Prep as well. So Jerry is a member of the class of 1978. by the way, the famous class of 1978. So we can talk about that because there's a lot of notable graduates from that class. But Jerry, my brother, is one of them. And then Greg, who's 5 years older than me, is a member of the class of 1982, which is also a great class, by the way.
Sure.
I know a lot of people from that class, including my cousin Matt. Matt Clark from Humes. So, but my brothers clearly had great influence on me, and I just wanted to follow in their footsteps.
Right. So you got to see their time at prep, as you were growing up, and the experiences they had, and knew that there was no doubt that was the place for you.
Absolutely, and that is exactly it. So I was, a witness to everything that they were going through, the hard work that is needed to be a student at prep, but then also the various activities that you can be exposed to, and the friendships that develop. That's certainly one of the things I'm going to emphasize based on my own experience at prep.
Yeah, absolutely. Now your time at prep, so your brothers were there previously. You end up going to school at prep. What are some of the things that stand out to you the most when you do look back at your time at prep? I mean, was it a certain class or teacher or a funny story? I mean, what is it that stands out to you the most from your time there?
Well, there are so many things that I could say with regards to that. But to try to roll it all together, it definitely starts with, the rigor of the schedule that's put together being a prep student, starting with academics. So I took advantage of all of the opportunities while I was at prep to take high-level courses. And I think that translated into giving me an experience in developing self-discipline. So I learned organizational skills. I learned to work hard. The concept of working hard, playing hard can certainly be applicable with going through prep.
Were those things that were innate to you, or would you say there was maybe some guidance from teachers or parents even that kind of developed those things in you early on, or were you kind of always that type of person that had that natural self-discipline and it just translated into your academics at prep too?
It's probably a little of both, Jimmy.
Yeah.
And I definitely will highlight again my parents' influence over me. So, my older siblings, I don't want to neglect the fact that I have a sister that's the oldest in our family who has had great influence over me too, Mary Beth.
Yeah.
But my parents, they definitely had high expectations for all of us to work hard and perform well. But prep just provides that natural sort of structure to facilitate something that might be naturally there, influenced by family, but then it gives you the right environment at Cathedral Prep to accomplish those kinds of high expectations. So, and I definitely can talk about faculty and teachers at Cathedral Prep. If I were to start somewhere, it's a hard one.
Yeah.
But I can name a number of teachers that had great influence over me. But I think the first person to call out is Miss Joanne Maxwell, who became Mrs. Mullen.
Yeah.
But I had lots of exposure to I'll still call her Miss Maxwell for right now.
Yeah.
And for those prep grads that are out there that were also influenced by her, they may very well agree with what I'm saying, that it does start with her, where she has very high expectations. She's a math teacher. I had her for half of the time that I was taking math. I had her for junior and senior year, and she clearly has, I guess, a major contribution to the self-discipline that I developed at prep.
Yeah. Awesome. And I kind of cut you off there. You were talking about your time at prep and you're going on the self-discipline and organization. Was there any other things beyond that? I didn't mean to cut you off, but in regards to your time at prep, any other special memories that you'd like to share? Anything that?
Well, yeah, whether it's academic or not academic, just sometimes it's the little things. I want to, mention that I can talk about other sort of categories of the great influence that prep had on me.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to emphasize the friendships that developed through prep.
Right.
And people with all kinds of backgrounds.
Yeah.
So I wasn't so athletic. at prep, but there are many that are and are very successful at athletics. And so I just loved and I think thrived in an environment where there was a lot of diversity in people's interests and backgrounds.
Yeah.
And then subsequently I developed bonds and friendships with them that are lifelong.
Yeah.
So I love that kind of a setting. In a school that had so much success,
Right.
historically, traditions, another maybe more appropriate word.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to go to prep, is to be a part of that tradition, and have my own experience during the 4 years of contributing to the tradition of Cathedral Prep. So, definitely proud of the fact that it's the right environment and was the right environment for me to sort of build upon characteristics or skills that were probably in development as when I was much younger.
Right. Yeah, and I can share similarly. I mean, I've mentioned before, my dad, he was the baseball coach at prep in the early 2000s. So the same way you could say you had no doubt you're going to prep, I similarly had no doubt that I was going to be a Rambler. And you're right. I mean, you get into the environment and it takes your level of work ethic, self-discipline, organization skills, and it forces you to enhance that to another level because of those academic requirements or the athletic requirements or whatever club you're in. And it's great because, the teachers, the coaches, they all work with you where you're at to help get you to that next level. And that's all everybody wants there, is to help all the students, and as you can, I'm sure, relate to, get to that next level. It helps teach tremendous skills that I know I still use today based on stuff I learned, however many years ago it was.
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, even the schedule, I don't know of any other program, and I know it's indeed similar today, where even the time in between classes is very limited. And I remember specifically the lunch breaks were only 23 minutes.
Yeah.
And that included the time you needed to go all the way down to the basement of the cathedral and all the way back to your next class. So it just really taught you to be incredibly focused and organized, and again, I use the self-discipline
Right.
Description a lot, because I really do believe that prep had a great influence over me with regards to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I will tell you that they did expand those lunch periods a little bit for the kids now. Yeah, so they're not quite the 23 minutes anymore. I was talking to actually Bill Flanagan about that the other day, joking. He's like, because I think mine was like a half hour or so, and he's like, "Oh, you know nothing about short lunch periods."
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Bill Flanagan was in my class.
Yeah. Yep.
Which you may have known that. So we had a great class too, by the way. Class of '87 was very successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. No, I appreciate you sharing that stuff about your time at prep and how you ended up there. Now I kind of want to transition a little bit and get into, so now you graduated from prep and now you're moving on to your academic studies furthering. As I was reading earlier, you went on to Boston College where you graduated cum laude. When did you know that medical field was where you wanted to pursue? Was it your junior, senior year at prep? Was it once you got to Boston College you made that decision? When did you decide that you knew the medical route was the path you wanted to go?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I think all along it was at the top of my list or near the top of my list throughout prep that I wanted to get into the health sciences.
Yeah.
And notably with an ambition to go to medical school. And so, I'll call out a couple other teachers like Mrs. Stashinsky, we called her Mrs. Stosh, taught me biology. Mr. Clancy, chemistry teacher, notable influence over me. So they created the foundation for my interest in the sciences.
Yeah.
I neglected to say the Gannon prep program was created during the time I was at prep.
Okay.
And so we were the first class to start taking classes
how cool.
at Gannon University for credit.
Yes.
So all of that, by the way, I think allowed me the opportunity to be accepted at Boston College, which is I definitely had an interest. I didn't talk about the Catholic education piece as much, but I always had an interest in sticking with a school that had it promoted Catholic education. So in Boston College, some of the audience may not know, is the largest Jesuit university in the country.
Oh, okay. I did not know that, yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to be accepted at Boston College and utilized the experience I had at Gannon University to, sort of skip some prerequisite classes because I had some credits that were applied, I should say. So, but I always knew, going back to your question, I always knew that healthcare was, certainly high on the list. And then I think that obviously developed as I moved into Boston College and then started to meet the requirements for applying to medical school. So that is the direction I stuck with.
Well, it's funny. I was looking at your background, of course, a little bit. Like I was able to read, and cum laude with a dual major with pre-med and psychology. That could not have been an easy task, I'm sure, for your time there. What areas allowed you to keep your focus and persistence? I'm sure there were some days that the studies were very difficult, being at Boston College, one of the top colleges in the country, while also pursuing two difficult majors. What kept you going forward with those studies,
Honestly, the hard work continued.
Yeah.
Prep was not easy academically.
Yeah.
So I was best prepared to go into an environment like, is applicable at a lot of universities, but at BC as well. So I had, the organizational skills, the self-discipline to stay committed.
Yeah.
But, Jimmy, there's clearly a correlation, particularly as we go through educational training, that learning becomes a lot easier. It still takes hard work, but when you're learning something that you love and it's natural, I think the simple analogy is if you take a class, whether it be in high school or in college, that you don't really like the material, then it's a lot harder to learn.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Yes, to get past it. But, as I advanced in my educational training, and this is especially true when I went to medical school, I thought, even though medical school is extremely challenging, takes a lot of time and hard work, but you're really learning something that you love, and it's something that's very applicable to what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I thought medical school was in some ways, I hate to use the word easier,
right,
but it was definitely more straightforward than even college.
Yeah.
But hopefully answering your question, I mean, it definitely, I want to tie back.
Wherever
I put hard work in, it helped what prep's influence was on me.
Well, and I'm sure some of our listeners to this podcast are going to be some students at prep, right? There's going to be some good amount of college students. You said something very key there. Learning can become very, very easy when you find what you are passionate about. What advice maybe would you give for a kid that, whether they're maybe junior, senior year, looking at what they might want to study in college, or maybe they're in college now and they're still either undeclared or they're not really passionate about what they're pursuing. For whatever reason, they're in that studies. What advice maybe would you give somebody who's sitting here asking you, how do I know what I'm passionate about? How would I know what field to go into, like you were able to find early on, luckily? What advice would you give for that kid?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and hopefully it's not too obvious of an answer. Maybe it'll be just reassuring for those in the audience to hear this. But first of all, it's very natural to not know what you want to do when you're younger, and or to want to do a whole bunch of things. So the best advice I can give is to explore, to go out and get exposed to all the different things that you're interested in, the opportunities. That there's opportunities to see the things that you're looking to do. And that's what I did, by the way. So I have a particular interest in my patient population in geriatrics. So you covered in my bio that I did a 1-year course program, I should say, at Gannon University in gerontology. Yeah. And so I, chose to do that on my own because I wanted to further, develop that interest. Maybe a better example is in healthcare. I got a job in healthcare, and there's lots of opportunities, including here at AHN St. Vincent, for young people to get their foot in the door, to get exposed to the various things that are happening in our setting. I did that. I was an orderly. I was an ER technician specifically. So, and that really solidified that, yes, I want to go to medical school.
Yeah.
So I advise young people to just go out and get experience. And then the last thing, well, I could say more things, but the other thing I want to emphasize, because this will go back to contemporary times at Cathedral Prep, I give a lot of credit to Mr. Patouche and the leaders at Prep for putting together these pathway programs. So, and I'm on the board of Cathedral Prep, and so I'm very close to what's happening from a curricular standpoint. And so they've created these pathways that allow for young people at Prep to start to find out if what they want to do. And the first one that they created was a MedPath program, which, by the way, AHN St. Vincent participates in.
Yeah.
So we've had Prep and formerly Villa students here on our campus learning all the different professions that you could consider as a healthcare caregiver. So, I think that's a great idea, and there's all kinds of other pathways that are out there now, including for business and engineering, and I think that that's a really good bit of advice to offer young people, is to just explore what the different opportunities are, because there are plenty of options.
Well, and it's funny you hit on that, because that was exactly where I was going to go with it too. So having been in this new STEAM center, this new building with the addition that we're putting on at the school, plus the renovation of the existing school, the one thing I tell everybody on various tours I've given is that, yes, this building is going to wow people and it's amazing what we're doing, but let me tell you about the academic opportunities we're going to be providing our students with. And you hit it exactly, the nail on the head with those pathway programs. Those opportunities you spoke of getting exposure, kids are going to have plenty of opportunities for hands-on learning, hands-on opportunities to really explore what they might be passionate about. And they might find that things that they didn't necessarily know they'd have a passion for, they discover because they had the opportunity to explore that now at Prep due to these pathway programs and various other opportunities that Mr. Patouche and others are putting together.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yep.
And it's okay to explore multiple things too.
Yeah.
And then finally, it's totally appropriate to have an interest in something and then decide that maybe you don't want to do that anymore. So that's, but you only can know that through almost like trial and error. I mean, you really just have to, take a look at what's out there and then you select. I mean, but it's a natural process for sure. It's really specifically advice to take advantage of all the opportunities.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here in regards to, so now we got to the point where we're going to talk about, you're now practicing at Primary Care Partners, right? So you're working in the field that you wanted to study, and now you decided to make that leap, that jump to being more on the administrative side, more on the, instead of family daily medicine practice, to being more on that side of things. What made you decide to take that leap into stepping out of maybe the daily family practices anymore?
Well, good question. It's sort of like my interest in healthcare and medicine. It was always there. So was my interest in leadership. And that goes back to my Cathedral Prep days when I was active in student government, and I was the senior class president. So that carried on into my time at Boston College, where I had a number of different leadership roles. But I like administrative work. I certainly still have a focus on and interest in healthcare delivery. And so maybe people don't know this, but I continue to practice primary care, but outpatient family medicine at this point. So, but while I was practicing, I was looking for administrative and leadership opportunities, including teaching too, by the way. So I love to teach. So that was the role that I was offered and privileged to be given here at St. Vincent when I started here in 2001.
Okay.
So I came on board and became a director for a academic program here, and it just allowed me, another opportunity to pursue something that I had great interest in, and that was leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, what are some things that you've learned along the way? I mean, I listed out a couple different various positions that you then pursued. You went on from that role to many other roles beyond that. What were some characteristics or things that you learned in your pursuits? Because I imagine some of our listeners are maybe just starting out in their career, or they're a little bit along, and they see those potential leadership opportunities that they love to reach for, but maybe they have doubts about themselves. Maybe they don't know if they are capable of achieving that, or maybe they do, they just don't know what their next move should be. What were some things that you learned in climbing yourself through the ranks here at St. Vincent, and just things that you learned personally along the way?
It's another very good question, and I by no means was able to predict, the path that I was going. I just know that it felt right to be doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I think that, because I get this question commonly from young people that ask me, maybe that are thinking very concretely, how do I become the CEO of a hospital? And it's not easy to just say a straightforward answer there. But looking back, what you have to emphasize to, I guess, your audience and those that are thinking the same way is that relationships matter, and how you treat people matter. It's really can fall under the umbrella of emotional intelligence too, which is a big area of focus of mine with regards to leadership. But you have to pay close attention to how you treat people, how you interact with others, how you are perceived by others too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't certainly steer away from the fact that, and I'm very faith-based, so God has a plan for everybody. So I think it was part of God's plan where I am and where each of us are. But no one knows what God's plan is.
Right. It'd be great if we did.
Yeah, exactly. So, from my standpoint, I guess it comes down to, working hard, so that self-discipline piece, staying focused, and pay very close attention to how you treat others.
Yeah.
And I guess, and I'm not perfect by any means. I've made my mistakes. We all do. But I think naturally things happen in your favor if you work hard and you treat others with respect and kindness. And that is indeed very, very important when you do achieve in a leadership role. It matters more than ever.
Yeah.
How you care about others, particularly members of the team, the people that you work with. Never ever feel like you're better than anyone.
Yeah.
And because every person is just one individual. So, and can't do, like myself in my role, I could never be successful in my role alone.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm answering your question.
Yeah,
I think what I'm emphasizing most importantly is that relationships matter, treat others with respect, and look up emotional intelligence. Maybe, because there's a lot of literature on it.
Yeah.
And there's, big areas of emotional intelligence. There's 4, big bucket areas of emotional intelligence that some people have skill sets in more naturally, and some people have weaknesses in some of the areas that they have to work on. And you can improve your emotional intelligence with focused and dedicated attention towards it.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. So I guess, do you have any, maybe like, you mentioned literature, do you maybe have any like books that you would recommend on the topics of either emotional intelligence or leadership or just in general that maybe somebody listening right now is saying, yes, I want to learn more about it, but where do I start? Because I've experienced you walk into Barnes & Noble and there's thousands of books on these topics. I guess, do you have any that specifically you'd recommend on any of those topics?
Yeah, oh my goodness. A lot of leadership books that I refer to, and my kids actually make fun of me because when they see me reading, about 50% of the books that I'm reading are leadership related. So I wish I had in front of me a whole bunch of books that I can refer to, that I can sort of quote my favorites. But at the same time, Well, John Maxwell is a well-known author
Yep.
in leadership. So a lot of books that I've looked at with regards to what he's written about.
Yeah.
Patrick Lencioni is another very famous author. One of his books is Death by Meeting.
Okay.
So he's somebody to refer to as well. But probably my favorite book on particularly change management is written by an author called John Cotter, and I think his book's called Leading Change.
Okay.
And I had a whole class in graduate school. I got a master's in health administration from Penn State along the way, and we had a whole class on that book.
Wow.
And learned a lot from that. So there's tons of resources out there that facilitate and allow for leaders that are actively working to be reminded of the most important principles that lead to success. And then again, I'll just mention I'm constantly looking at that just to, again, provide a refresh and hopefully allow me to do a better job in the work that I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that's a good point you just made there too. Even as you're climbing up the ranks and you're getting in these leadership positions, sometimes it's reading these books as a reminder to those basic principles as you were talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're constantly learning. I mean, I think complacency in whatever we do should be considered our enemy. We need to realize that no matter what you do, in my role and everyone else's role out there, you should never be satisfied with the status quo. So talking about this, using leadership books, that's just one way of just staying fresh and relearning. It's very, very often it's relearning principles, but it does allow you to avoid that situation where you're settled and that you don't do anything differently in your work.
So if maybe reading books, let's say somebody's in a complacent state right now, or even somebody who's like, man, I'm sick and tired of being in the same spot, month after month, day after day, because nobody wants to be in that spot in life where you're not enjoying what you're doing, and it's just the grind of putting in your 40 hours and just repeat over and over. So if somebody is in that situation right now and they're complacent and they're maybe hearing this and it's the first time they're really thinking, yeah, I need to do more, I need to advance. So reading was one thing that you recommended, reading leadership books, things like that. What are some maybe other advice that you would give somebody in that spot, whether professionally, personally, things that you would recommend to help get you out of the rut, so to speak?
Yeah, actually, a lot of things come to mind, but you definitely need to somehow result in hitting the refresh button. And I also want to just take a step back for a second and help people realize that, again, this is a learning process for me. And sometimes I look at what I do at the big picture level and just set expectations at a more reasonable level. Like one example of a phrase I constantly use is, you want to have more good days than bad days. But by saying that, you acknowledge there's going to be bad days.
Right.
You just have to be careful that you don't give up on those bad days.
Right.
So, but ultimately, if someone's feeling complacent out there, you need to somehow accomplish hitting the refresh button. So literature can do that, finding a good resource that can allow you to be pointed in the right direction. Maybe better than that is to just go on a retreat or a vacation. Just get a break.
Yeah.
And sometimes those breaks can be just a few days too. It doesn't mean you have to go off to, the Caribbean for 2 weeks or something, because that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the opportunity to get away, that's ideal. Maybe a retreat, a religious retreat where you can separate. Because ultimately, what I wanted to mention is find time for yourself, find time for reflection, or that can equate to finding time to pray. So I'm big on prayer, which can be defined in so many ways, but it's simply just thinking through things, talking to God, trying to find out what the plan is for you. And as a part of prayer, and this is a part of leadership too, by the way, you have to build in gratitude. You have to recognize what's going well, because we're all blessed in so many different ways. Do we all have challenges? For sure, but I think before you start asking for support on how to deal with challenges, I personally believe in starting with gratitude and recognizing what's going well. And then finally, I didn't mention, and I need to, physical fitness. And that literally has a physiologic benefit too. So now I'm not perfect at that.
Sure.
I'm only a recent runner as a part of my physical exercise, meaning over the last 15 years, I just started running. Thanks to my wife's influence, by the way. My wife's a real runner.
Well, there you go.
But physical fitness should be a part of the approach to avoiding complacency too, and I'm a big proponent of physical fitness and breaking away, getting away by going to Presque Isle. So I think all of us in Erie need to recognize the natural wonder and gem that we have. I call it an oasis out there. Particularly during the nicer weather days.
Right.
But we all should take advantage of either Presque Isle or finding a place like Presque Isle, because there's a lot of other options in this community, like Wintergreen Gorge or like Asbury Woods. But that's another way to avoid complacency. Get a break, go reflect, go exercise.
Right. Maybe think about those goals that you do have and take the time to actually slow down. I know I've been in there before, that spot of life where you're just going through the motions, and you might even be advancing in what you're doing. But sometimes you need that step back just to reflect on, what are my goals? What are my priorities? What areas do I want to focus on to actually, and also, is what I'm doing going to achieve the goals I want? Because sometimes we can get stuck in an area that is not actually producing the results we're intending to.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I also don't want to neglect the fact, I wanted to talk to you about the importance of family time. Because obviously, this is a podcast where we're talking a lot about, experiences at prep and your educational journey and your career and leadership. But I also want to talk about, briefly here, is how important family time is for you, and what you would recommend for people in terms of having that time, because I think that's an essential component. The goal isn't to just work and neglect your family. It's to be there in all areas for your family. So I guess, what would you say about that topic?
Yeah, I couldn't say enough about my family.
Yeah.
And talk about gratitude. That's where it all starts with recognizing the blessings that I have for having my family. So starting with my wife and my 3 kids. You mentioned Jacob, Sarah, and Adam. So I am so grateful for our family and the time that we have together. That's definitely a way to break away from the stresses of life. And then, of course, my extended family beyond there. My mom's still around, thank God.
Yeah.
And then my siblings, who I've mentioned previously. So we spend quality time together for sure. And I highly advise, whoever your family is, it equates to whoever you love.
Yeah.
So certainly recommend the obvious, it sounds, but I take full advantage of recognizing the importance of my family and how that relates to, how I can even be more successful in the work that I do.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you touching on that, because it's an important part for me. I have 3 kids of my own with another on the way, so
my goodness.
We'll be back here in the hospital in a couple months here in October for our 4th child. So that's
I give you a lot of credit there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
4 children.
4 and we're done. That's what I've been telling my wife. Is that's it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Thank you. All right, so you went over a lot of really great stuff, a lot of good content. I've been taking notes. We've been talking and writing down some key phrases and stuff that I know I'm going to reflect on as well. So I appreciate your time. One final question for you. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now with your career and life, if you were to give the commencement speech at your graduation, what would you say to your class at that time?
Knowing what I know now.
Knowing what you know now, yes. Yeah.
So, I guess that's a really fascinating question. Haven't thought much about what I would be saying in a situation like that. I guess I would give, if we had, this was a time machine kind of a scenario, I would just reassure that audience, my classmates, that this was the right thing. Mm. And I'm obviously speaking for myself, but there's a lot of my prep classmates that I know are equally successful. And, at the time you're young, you have so much to learn, including, more maturity ahead. But, you don't know if, and there were issues that we ran into that were challenges during high school, like they happen everywhere. Yeah. So you don't know if it was the right thing for you. I would create a message if I was in that situation of providing an address that you did the right thing by selecting Cathedral Prep, by all the hard work. It's going to pay off. I mean, I sort of feel that way. Yeah. Now, I don't know what's ahead for me personally. People, based on all those biographical statistics that you threw out there, people can figure out my age. I'm 53, so hopefully I have many years ahead. But I'm confident that at least what I've been what I've done so far, that I've had great influence from Cathedral Prep that has led to that. So I would send a message to that audience. Yeah. Congratulations, you did the right thing.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time again. I feel like we could sit here for hours and talk more about this, and maybe we'll have to have you on again as a guest in the future to dive into this stuff a little bit deeper. But you provided us some really great information and wisdom and experience based on your career so far. And I just want to thank you again for the time and coming on.
You're welcome, Jimmy. This was truly a nice exercise for me, allowing me to reflect back to my years at Prep. And, it's been an honor actually for my children to go through Prep too. So as you previously mentioned, I have an oldest son that graduated a couple years ago. He's doing very well in college at John Carroll because of his experience at Prep. And then my daughter will be the first class, co-ed class at Cathedral Prep here next year. And then I'll have a freshman son. Yeah. So it'll be the first time I'll have two children at Prep at the same time. So, thanks for this opportunity. I hope this has helped the audience and the listeners, and I'll do anything to help Cathedral Prep.
Absolutely. Thanks so much again.
You're welcome.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to episode 2 of the Rambler Podcast. I hope you got as much out of this conversation I had with Dr. Clark as I did. The next episode of the Rambler Podcast will be released on August 15th, where I'm going to sit down with Cathedral Prep's new head football coach, Mike Cray. I'm going to talk to Coach Cray about his time as a player and coach previously at Prep, what brought him back to coach here, and what he is most excited for this upcoming season. It's going to be a great conversation, so stay tuned for that. Thanks again for listening, and roll Ramblers.